move into that spirit of coming together. Rudy gave me that song, and it just seemed to be so fitting that God has called us to stay together right now, not just in this congregation, but across our communities, across our connection. When I use that phrase, the connection, I mean United Methodism. We are called to stay together. Now, it's easier, like I've been saying, to get off in our own little corners, but think about the good that we do together. Today, we are reminded once again on this journey. This is my low-key stewardship series. Remember that. Some people, when you say the word stewardship, they immediately go the other way, but this is the low-key way that we have been journeying together. As we have explored Canoeing the Mountains by author Todd Bolsinger, we have been encouraged to embrace one another. We have been encouraged to look off into the horizon and see an adventure that God has called us into. We have been encouraged to hunker down for the journey, to get closer so that we might give the world something that it does not have. We might offer the world the love of Jesus. Now, this past week, or I should say a week or so ago, I had an opportunity to go to Atlanta, Georgia, and I had to run around. I was in service of our conference, and I actually think I got a couple preachers to come back this way. I didn't show them any pictures of the snow that we had on Halloween. Thank God they didn't ask me. But in the midst of that time in Atlanta, I had a chance to be with my family, and I had a chance to explore some of the stresses and strains that exist in my family. I don't know about your family, because most of y'all come from perfect families, but in my family, sometimes we don't always get along, and sometimes we pick at one another and we point out one another's shortcomings. But I was determined that on this trip, it was going to be a pleasant trip. It was going to be a trip that built relationships. I think that is the key word, relationships. Today, some would say, well, how do you stay together when people may have different theological or political views, or from different colors or ethnic groups, or from different economic statuses? How do we stay together, and why do we want to do that? I believe that Isaiah and Matthew lead us there with one word: relationships. You've heard that word from me, and you heard that word a lot from my predecessor, Ken Hogran, that it's all about relationships, staying together. No, not just staying together because that's what we're supposed to do, staying together for a purpose. But when I look a little deeper into those biblical passages from Isaiah, the 41st chapter, verses 10 through 13, and Matthew, the 6th chapter, verses 25 through 27, certain words and phrases jump out at me. One of those words is fear. Sometimes we are so afraid of what comes next. Sometimes we are so afraid and fearful of the unknown that it becomes difficult for us to take the next step, to go down that next path, to climb the next mountain, to canoe the next river. Sometimes we allow our fears to paralyze us with the thought that if we just stay still, everything will be all right. But when this week I expanded this scriptural passage, originally it was only verse 13, and verse 13 was a very uplifting verse. It was a pleasant verse, and I expanded it to 10 through 13. Now, again, our wonderful directing staff who assist and work with me and partner with me asked me, did I really want to do that? Because, verse 11 and 12, they kind of negative. And we don't really want to talk about negativity, do we? Well, the more I thought about it, the more I struggled with these things that the scriptures say we will encounter as we try to live into God's future, the more I thought about my own life and some of the trials and tribulations that I have been through as a father and as a husband and as a pastor and as a friend and as a son and as a brother and as an uncle, I thought about it and I said, life is not all peaches and cream. It's not always smooth and smooth sailing. But in the midst of those trying times, what did I come away with? What was I able to grab hold of? And as I look back, what propels me forward? It is that belief, that understanding, that realization that in the midst of all of those struggles, in the midst of sometimes betrayals and some of the people who were my friends or colleagues turning their backs on me, in the midst of all of that, God never turned God's back on me. And God's hand is there like a parent. I would encourage you to imagine however you envision God to be in the most pleasant and welcoming ways, to imagine that God. And for me, it's from my historical, cultural background. I see this God who is this kindly, grandfatherly looking person who's reaching down with this big hand, and God is reaching toward my hand and asking me to place my hand in his hand. And as I place my hand in God's hand, it doesn't mean that all my troubles went away. It doesn't mean that all our fears are unfounded, but it means that I am not walking alone and that neither will you walk alone. I'd like to say that the days ahead for Willow Hill will be smooth sailing. There will be no trials and no tribulations, that there is nothing that we have to fear. But honestly, there is, and there are fears that we will have to encounter. There are fears that you will have to embrace, that you will have to set an example for the rest of our community. And I believe this is a special church. I believe that you will embrace those fears, you will encounter them, and you will move past them. You will not allow fear to paralyze you. I believe that you will embrace God's hand together from your different perspectives, because you represent a diversity of perspectives, not just here this morning, but during our time. You will go down that path together into what I believe, and this is just Brad Watkins, is a bright future. A future that will bring people toward God, will invite them to know that they are accepted, that they don't have to be perfect, that they can make mistakes, that they can have different perspectives and persuasions, that God loves all. Willow Hill will be that example. I believe that as I looked at Matthew a little bit closer, those verses, and I swear to you, these verses were chosen months ago. Do not worry. God, I believe some people call it serendipity or serendipitous, but I believe God doesn't do these things by happenstance. Today, I have been invited, and you are going to be invited to not worry about what's going on or what may happen tomorrow or in a few days or in a few months, but you will be invited to plan, to dream, and to move forward. Do not worry. Those words hang in the air, I believe, like something precious that God offers us. Staying together, we will be able to encounter those things that we would normally worry about. We will be able to move through them. We can't get around them. Some used to say you can't get over them, you can't get above them, but we can go through them. What are we seeking to stay together and to connect it to? Some say, why do some people, like Brad, for instance, believe that we as a people called United Methodists have a special place and a special opportunity to show the world God's love. When I think about all the good that we do, don't let yourself be overcome by negativity and by news reports of division and news reports of this or that. Embrace the positive. And there is no but to that. If somebody said to me, Brad, I can embrace the positive, but no buts. Stay connected because God has called us to share God's love. The love of Jesus. Remember, this little button here says just love. Why is staying connected a positive thing? I just want to show a few pictures now because y'all know I love my family. And those two people there, those are my parents. And they called me last night, actually, and I was reminded of the foundation that they set in me and continue to encourage in me. And then there's another picture here. And I like that picture because it's my boys and my wife. I did not ask Debbie's permission to show the picture. I just picked pictures that I like. The picture reminds me that it doesn't end with me. That God has given us an opportunity to send God's message and hope forward in 4 different ways. Nobody could be more different than those 4 young men in that picture. And yet we love them the same as God loves you the same, even in your differences. And now there's another picture here. As I think about that, I see this collage here with my granddaughters there, and there's one that hasn't come on this world yet, but she's due in February. But she's still in her mom right there, and we're excited that we're going to have these 3 granddaughters to love on, and that hopefully share God's love with the world, and so that what we give to their mother and their father, they will give to the world. And then there's a picture down at the bottom there. That's my father's mother. I never knew her, Lorraine Frances Watkins. She passed early when my dad was a child, but I have to believe that somehow her spirit was passed to my dad, and my dad passed it to me. As we move forward as Willow Hill Church, we are invited into a global mission. There's a map that I hope that we have of the United Methodist Global Missions. And as we look at that map, we are reminded, now I know it's too small for you to read it, but there are colored dots on that map. There are red dots, and there are green dots, and there are blue dots. And you can look it up if you want to actually read it someday. Go to United Methodist Church Mission, or General Board of Global Ministry mission map. That is you. Some people say, well, what are we doing, Brad? That is you. Over 300 missionaries established and working, pastors and doctors and nurses and teachers and social workers and church planters and others serving in so many different ways because of you. Willow Hill, we are connected for a reason, not just for ourselves, but for God's greater glory. Never forget that. As I could reconnect to the spirit of Isaiah 41, there's an old African-American spiritual that says, hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand. You ought to just hold to his hand, God's unchanging hand. Those are my words to you. Hold to God's hand,